Since the Ukrainian army began staging parallel counteroffensives in eastern and southern Ukraine a few months ago, the Russian army has been losing 10 tanks a day on average. The Ukrainian army's tank losses have been substantially lower, with only 2 tanks lost daily. The disparity is shocking. An invading army typically loses more equipment than a defending army because the attacker must traverse the terrain. At the same time, the defender can hunker down in trenches and bunkers and start a fire. In this video, we will explain the reasons behind this heavy loss. Is it the Russian army's strategic failure or the better defensive strategy of the Ukrainian army? Let's find out. Russian tank manufacturing. The economic crisis in Russia has had a direct impact on its tank manufacturing industry. Inflation, devaluation of the ruble, and restricted access to foreign markets have led to production delays and cost overruns for Russian factories producing tanks. This is further compounded by sanctions imposed upon Russia's arms industry, which limits their ability to acquire parts from abroad or purchase new equipment needed for production. As a result of these financial constraints, the number of tanks being produced has decreased substantially compared to pre-crisis levels. In contrast, costs per unit have increased dramatically due to a need for more available resources and materials. These shortages are particularly problematic when it comes to supplying military forces with tanks, as they require large numbers in order to operate effectively during operations, such as those occurring along the Ukrainian border. In comparison, there are some reports that Russia has managed to produce enough tanks despite restrictions. However, no official figures exist as many companies remain reluctant or unable to report accurate data due to this situation's sensitive nature. The consequences of these limitations may be far-reaching if addressed slowly by both sides involved in this conflict through diplomatic channels like those provided by international organizations like the UN or OSCE. If current trends continue, then it could lead towards an even more significant escalation in violence, which would be detrimental for everyone involved, including both Ukraine and Russia itself, who will face increasing difficulties accessing necessary armaments needed to defend themselves against potential threats posed by other countries looking to capitalize off their weakened state. Exactly how many tanks does Russia have? Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is already remembered as the giant tank killing in Europe since World War II. Within just a few weeks after February 24, the reckless and futile Kremlin blitzkrieg against Kyiv cost the loss of nearly 1,000 tanks. By April, scores of burned vehicles had been dismembered by Ukrainian anti-tank units, turning numerous battlefields in northern Ukraine into tank graves. Even with considerable force, this severe setback to Russia's offensive capability. Contrary to its claims, Russia's infamously sizable inventory of Soviet tanks is merely a collection of useless scrap metal. However, it is unlikely that Russia will soon have a severe shortage of tanks. Despite suffering significant losses, Russia still has enough weapons to fight its battle for many years. This is yet another reason for Ukraine to make every effort to prevent a lengthy, multi-year conflict, for which the Kremlin has ample resources. The disaster. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has shown that all predictions about the end of the tank age were too early. The military of Ukraine has increased the use of tanks in battle due to necessity. As usual, main battle tanks continue to back the infantry, lead attacks, and seize tactical advantages, with mechanized infantry trailing behind. Since there is a shortage of field artillery, many Ukrainian operators train howitzer-style indirect firing on distant targets. Even in urban combat, Russian forces continue to use tanks as their primary concentrated fire support tool. The accessibility of reasonably affordable and practical anti-tank weapons, such as the now famous NLAWs that the UK sent to Ukraine and used by highly mobile Ukrainian battalions to ambush Russian convoys, has significantly questioned the tank's crucial role. Midway through June, Mark A. Milley, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, reported that the international community had given Ukraine 97,000 different anti-tank weaponry. According to Milley, this is more anti-tank systems than there are tanks in the world. Russia's intentions for an immediate overthrow of Ukraine have spectacularly failed due to the West's massive investment in Ukraine's anti-armor capabilities. According to the Military Balance 2021 database, Russia possessed about 3,330 operable tanks at the start of its full-scale invasion in February, 2,840 with ground troops, 330 with naval infantry, and 160 with airborne forces. The T-72, T-80, and T-90 tank models and their upgrades are all currently used by the Russian military. According to Oryx, an online investigative effort tracking equipment losses, Russia has lost more than 1,000 tanks since September. Flawed strategy. strategy. The Russian army employs self-contained combat units known as battalion tactical groups, consisting of tanks, infantry, and artillery. Few infantry soldiers protect to accompany and react if the armored column is attacked, because these forces are made up of several armored vehicles intended to attack swiftly and with a lot of firepower. The effectiveness of Ukrainian tactics combined with anti-tank weapons supplied by the West has delivered Russia a severe blow. Russian units are capable of doing a lot of damage. The reactive armor of several Russian tanks is built to deflect missile impact. Nevertheless, American-made javelins, for instance, are equipped with 2 warheads. The first destroys the reactive armor and pierces the hull below. Current tank shortages in Russia. In recent years, the Russian government under President Vladimir Putin has faced an increasingly difficult situation concerning tank supplies. This is partly due to his strategy of allocating a more significant portion of the national budget towards military spending and weaponry, rather than other areas such as infrastructure or education. As a result, there has been a shortage of tanks available by the Russian army, which could have severe implications for their ability to defend against potential threats from other countries, such as Ukraine or NATO forces. The need for more tanks can be attributed to 2 main factors. Firstly, Russia needs them for defensive purposes. And secondly, they want them for offensive operations to assert control over disputed territories like Crimea. In addition, the current economic climate has made it increasingly difficult for Russia to acquire new tanks due to international sanctions restricting access to foreign markets and materials used in production. Furthermore, these restrictions have led some experts within Russia's defense sector to advocate that they should look into options, such as leasing existing tanks from abroad or relying more heavily on outdated models instead of modern ones if necessary due to being unable to purchase newer units. However, this approach comes with its set risks, including reliability issues associated with older vehicles, which may need to be able to handle specific tasks required when effectively engaging enemy forces during combat operations. Furthermore, it also leaves the possibility that Western powers could exploit any weaknesses presented by using inferior equipment, thus creating further instability overall. Therefore, finding ways to tackle the current tank shortages facing Russia is essential for both short-term interests. Still, also long-term prospects for stability. Entire regions surrounding the Black Sea area, where much tension between Ukrainian troops backed by NATO allies versus Russian-backed separatists already exists since the annexation of 2014 following the Euromaidan Revolution, which saw the removal of former President Viktor Yanukovych's power after corruption scandal occurred while in office. It will require political courage for both sides to come up with diplomatic solutions to resolve the crisis without resorting to even harsher measures taken before. The leading escalation of violence in the past few years resulted in countless deaths and injuries to thousands of people affected by conflict directly. The current economic crisis in Russia has had a significant impact on its tank manufacturing industry. The country's ability to produce tanks has been dramatically reduced due to inflation, the ruble devaluation, restricted access to foreign markets, and sanctions imposed upon their arms industry. This lack of resources, coupled with increased military spending for ammunition and weaponry needed for offensive operations in Ukraine, has caused a severe shortage of tanks by Russian forces. As long as these challenges remain unresolved, there will continue to be an ever-increasing risk of instability escalating along the border between Ukraine and Russia, resulting in further suffering losses on both sides. As a result, finding solutions soon becomes an even greater priority for those involved to ensure the safety and security of all parties concerned, ultimately leading to better future generations coming after us.